So welcome back. I am your host, Amanda Sakash, also known as the Skincare Badass. And today we are going to talk about my favorite thing on the planet, which is skin. Okay, you guys, there is so much to get into with this. We're gonna break this down. This is going to be a series because this would get really boring really quick. So to keep it super fun and fresh and interesting, today we're gonna talk a little bit about the epidermis. What is the epidermis? That is what you see, right? So your skin is the largest organ in your body, and you've got a couple different layers of it. You've got your epidermis, and then you've got your dermis. So I always like to show people by my fingers. So if you think about it like this, so this is your epidermis. So this is, if you look at it like this is what you actually see. This is all the tissue underneath. This where it meets, this is what's called your epidermal dermal junction. So it's this band that goes like this, right? And then underneath is your dermis. This is your live tissue. This is where your collagen building blocks are. This is where your elastin fibers are woven through. And then underneath that is your adipose tissue. That's your fat that kind of holds everything up. Whole nother segment to talk about like cellulite and adipose tissue and how it actually appears in the skin. But for now, we're going to talk about this upper part right here, the epidermis. So why is that important? Why do you guys even care about your epidermis, right? Because when we're talking about skincare and facials and lasers and peels and all the things that you do at spas or the treatments you do at home, it makes a really big difference understanding the skin. So what you're doing at home is like barely touching the top of the surface, right? What we do in the treatment room can actually go all the way down into the dermis. Most of the time, estheticians stay within this top part or middle part of your epidermis, but can penetrate down to the bottom of the epidermis. But when you work in a med spa and you start doing microneedling, aggressive peels, lasers, it's going all the way down to the dermis. So I just want you guys to have kind of like a brief overview of the layers of your epidermis. And then we can always talk a little bit more about different skincare products, different services, and how far deep they penetrate down into that epidermis. So let's start at the bottom, right? Right where that epidermal dermal junction is, it's called your EDJ. Right above that is your stratum germinativium. Okay, I'm gonna geek out for like a few minutes, guys. Bear with me. It's super cool shit though, I swear. So the bottom layer is your stratum germinativium. That's where those melanocytes live. We talked a little bit in the tanning segment about melanocytes. That's what gives you pigment, right? So there's one melanocyte to every 10 to 60 skin cells. That's what gives you the pigmentation and color to your skin, right? So I always call those like the mama cells, and they give the little lunch sacks to the baby cells and then send them off to school, and they travel up the skin cells or up the layers of your epidermis, right? And become grown-up cells. So you've got your stratum germinativium, and then after that, you've got your stratum granulosum. After that, you've got stratum spinosum, stratum lucidum, stratum corneum. So I know you're like, who the F cares, right? So something that's super cool I just want to touch base on is your stratum lucidum is a clear jelly layer. So where do you think you have a really thick, clear jelly layer in your skin? Your hands and your feet. So you see how you can kind of like see through it a little bit more? So that's kind of cool, right? To know that like, this is why as human beings, we have a much thicker layer in our hands and our feet so we can do things with them and it doesn't like break apart. Like if we walked on our face, we wouldn't have a face, right? We can walk on our feet because we can do that, right? So as these skin cells travel up through the epidermis, they start to break apart and then they get kind of like yucky and then they get like these what's called spines. And as they break apart, this grainy shit comes out of them. That's where you go to the next layer, stratum granulosum, because it's the grainy layer. All this stuff coming out of your skin cells starts to create grains, right? The next one is the stratum spinosum. What does that mean? That's where they start to grow these like little spikes, little dendrites, as we'll call them. And you can see from all the cool little video that's going on right here, what they do, super rad. As they grow spines, then those spines then connect to each other. And then that's how they form a layer of skin. Otherwise you'd be like, you know, if you've ever cut yourself, you can see into underneath the skin. It's like fatty, it's pink, it's all this weird shit, right? So what happens is these skin cells are breaking apart, creating dendrites, fingers, spines, whatever you want to call them. They're connecting to each other and they're building the skin cells that are creating your face or your arms or wherever, right? So something to consider. So something to consider when you start looking at different products and things like that, when you understand your skin and you understand how the layers work, you really know what products to use. I'm not expecting you guys to understand everything I'm saying at home. What I do expect though is if you go to see an esthetician and she can't explain to you the difference between your stratum corneum, which is the most outer layer, which is your dead cells, which you're exfoliating off all the time, and a melanocyte, girl, you need to find a new esthetician. Let's be real. So most of what you're doing, we've talked in other segments about like skincare and facials and scrubs and things like that, right? Most of what you're doing is in that stratum corneum. It's that outer layer. It's all dead skin cells. Here's something really interesting. Our skin cells naturally shed off on a regular basis. The older we are, the less they shed off. So then you start getting this buildup, right? Your skin looks drier, it looks dull. You start to get these ridges, AKA wrinkles and fine lines, right? It all correlates to this epidermis. It's ridiculously imperative to understand that it's not just one layer of skin. There's multiple layers and there's lots of different things happening in all of these layers of the skin. You need to go to see an esthetician that understands these layers of the skin, understand what's going on with your skin, and understands how to treat these layers of the skin. I know you guys are at home like, what the hell does this mean? Why do I care about this? It's important to speak to a technician, an esthetician, a dermatologist, whoever that understands these types of things, right? If you have a damaged barrier, so that means there's issues in between all those layers we just talked about where cells are not connecting and you're losing water, you're losing oil, you're losing nutrients in the skin. You need to make sure that the esthetician you're going to understands that you need a lipid replacer. You need something that's going to have an oil base, something that's going to help to create and repair that barrier. You also need to know that if you have a ton of excess dead skin, what type of exfoliant is going to be the best for you? If you're super oily and thick textured skin, and maybe things you're still kind of sensitive though, because your barrier is kind of damaged or messed up or whatever, you need to make sure that that person understands that you need a good exfoliant. You need salicylic acid. You need something that's going to go after the oil and still exfoliate and repair what's going on. It's not always just one thing or another. So the skin is extremely complex, you guys. Everything makes a difference to your epidermis, right? You've got these 5 layers, and within each of these 5 layers, all kinds of crazy shit is going on every single day. What you do outside affects it, your stress affects it, your products affect it, your treatments affect it, your food affects it, your health affects it, medication affects it. I mean, do you want me to keep going? Because I can keep going, right? A lot of shit affects it. So make sure that you know skin is very complex. A freaking influencer, I don't care how many followers she has on Instagram or on YouTube. If she's not a licensed esthetician, she doesn't freaking get it. If she's not a doctor, if she's not a dermatologist, and she hasn't spent the time and the energy to understand what freaking happens in your stratum germinatavium, then she don't know shit. Let's be real. So I know I get kind of crazy about this, but I get so frustrated because we have people walking our doors every day that are like, oh, I'm going to use this scrub because this influencer told me. And I'm like, this is awful for your skin. This is going to damage your skin. Every single thing you put on your skin is going to penetrate. So what do you want it to penetrate to do? Are you trying to exfoliate? Are you trying to heal? Are you trying to nourish? Do you even know what the fuck you're doing? Do you understand the ingredients? Do you understand the way the skin works? No. So I really just wanted to do a quick little tidbit today about your epidermis and why it's important to understand all of these different functions. I'm going to do another couple segments, guys. We're going to talk a little bit about the dermis. When we do the dermis, we're going to talk a little bit about different treatments that penetrate down to the dermis and why it's important to have some treatments penetrate down to the dermis and why it's important to have some treatments that do not penetrate down to the dermis, because that's your live tissue. And you start going down there with somebody that doesn't know what they're doing, or they're getting too aggressive with a certain light therapy or a needle, they can really fuck some shit up. Like, let's be real, like they can really, really damage skin. And so that's what I want to avoid. I want to give you guys all the information, all the content, so you can make really good educated decisions for what's best for your skin, who to see, when to see, where to see, all that fun stuff. So stay tuned. We've got more information coming up, more content, whatever, you know the drill. Hit subscribe below and we'll see you next time.